you have something you want to say? You're looking at me like you got something you want to say. I'm only going to ask you one more time, son. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, Warden. As a matter of fact, there are some things I want to say.
On Halloween morning 1981, a Roman Catholic nun was raped, stabbed, and strangled to death in her St. Francis convent bedroom on Northeast 18th Avenue in Amarillo. Her body was found about 7:30 in the morning on October 31, 1981, after another sister in the convent noticed her absence at 6:30 Mass. The death was first considered accidental, but an autopsy performed by pathologist Ralph Erdman revealed the macabre details of her death. Investigators initially thought the killing was tied to the July 9, 1981 rape and murder of Narnie Cox Bryson, 77, in her home in the 700 block of North Houston Street in Amarillo. News reports in the days following that murder show officials searching for a Cuban refugee. But on November 9, 1981, Amarillo Police Sergeant Walter Yerger linked Garrett, then 17, to fingerprints in Nun Bentz's room. Danny Hill, the 47th District Attorney at the time, had told the Globe News that Yerger knew Garrett and knew some of his habits. Yerger already was familiar with the teen because he'd been identified as a suspect in a burglary case Yerger investigated. As a youth, Garrett was raped by his stepfather, who then hired him to another man for sex. From the age of 14, he was forced to perform bizarre sexual acts and participate in pornographic homosexual films. He was first introduced to alcohol and other drugs by members of his family at the age of 10 and subsequently indulged in serious substance abuse, involving brain-damaging substances such as paint thinner and amphetamines. Garrett was regularly beaten and on one occasion was put upon the burner of a stove, resulting in severe scarring. On November 9, 1981, Johnny Frank Garrett, who lived across the street from the convent, was arrested for Sister Bentz's murder. Information on Johnny Frank Garrett's abusive upbringing and mental health problems were not made available to the jury. According to 3 mental health experts who examined him between 1986 and 1982, Garrett was extremely mentally impaired, chronically psychotic, and brain damaged as the result of several severe head injuries he sustained as a child. He suffered from paranoid delusions, including a belief that the lethal injection would not kill him. One of the experts described Garrett's case as one of the most virulent histories of abuse and neglect I have encountered in over 28 years of practice. But still, he was found guilty and sentenced to death. He would spend his remaining days on death row in Huntsville, Texas. He was originally scheduled for execution on January 2, 1992, but following appeals for clemency from Pope John Paul and the nuns from the victim's convent, then Governor Ann Richards granted Garrett a rare 30-day executive reprieve. However, after a grossly inadequate clemency hearing, the Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted unanimously not to recommend commutation of his death sentence, and the execution of Johnny Frank Garrett was allowed to proceed. According to his confession, which he never signed, Garrett raped the 76-year-old Roman Catholic nun and choked her to death. Garrett, 17 at the time, told police that the Swiss-born nun recited the Lord's Prayer during the attack. Garrett proclaimed his innocence to the end. He did not write or sign any confession. The detective said in the confession, Garrett indicated he was drunk and high on LSD when he broke out a convent window to steal a stereo. A letter that the detectives later had draws comparisons between the poor nun's slaying and that of Narnie Cox Bryson, 77. The two were slain 3 months apart, in a similar manner in the same part of town. The similarities were so striking that the district attorney at the time Danny Hill and detectives were convinced the same man killed both women. Leoncio Perez Ruda, aged 54, remains in jail for Bryson's slaying. It's said that during a recent interview, Ruda described raping and beating a nun on Halloween night in 1981. Ruda, a Cuban refugee, was indicted in July after authorities matched his DNA with semen samples collected during Bryson's autopsy. Ruda's attorney, Maria Lopez, declined to comment. Garrett's case involved Ralph Erdman, West Texas Maine forensic pathologist in the 1980s, who pleaded no contest to falsifying autopsies and tampering with evidence. After serious omissions were found in about 100 cases, Erdman's felony conviction raised questions in dozens of cases he had handled. It is said Erdman discarded semen samples taken during Nun Bentz's autopsy. At Garrett's trial, Erdman testified he threw the samples away because no one told him to save them. Erdman, who lives in San Antonio, said that he does not recall the case. Garrett's final day on Earth would be February 11, 1992. He was executed by lethal injection at the age of 28 and maintained his innocence until his last breath. His last act was one of vengeance against the people who sent him to the death chamber. He declared a curse on those involved.
Do you have something you want to say? You're looking at me like you got something you want to say. I'm only going to ask you one more time, son. Do you have anything you want to say?
Yeah, Warden. As a matter of fact, there are some things I want to say. I'd like to thank my friends and my family. And I'd like to thank my guru and everybody else that's helped me get through all this. The rest of this world, well, you can kiss my ever-loving ass because I'm innocent. And for those people responsible for my murder tonight, you know who you are. Well, I got some words for you too, but I put those in a letter. Something for you to look forward to tomorrow.
The night that Johnny was arrested, I heard the knock on the door, and I said, And so I went to the door, and it was dark. We were watching Monday Night Football. It was very plain in my mind, and Johnny was sitting at my feet while I was crocheting, and the other kids, we were all in there watching Monday Night Football in the front room. And so I opened the front door, and lo and behold, there was about, I couldn't even count the number of policemen that were there. But the detective came in, there were 3 or 4 policemen came in, there was another man came in that had camera, and I thought, what in the world is going on? And I couldn't imagine. And this one of them said they had a warrant for Johnny's arrest for stealing a pickup truck. Okay, and then after that, I said, wow. And I saw this, that they had a news break, you know, like they do on the TV. They said they had found they'd arrested someone in the murder of Sister Benz's death. And I said, wow. I said, oh my God, my neighbors will think that Johnny Frank was in on that because of all the cops that was here. My sister called me, and she told me, she said, Charlotte. And I said, what? And she said, this is Deborah. I said, yeah, I know, honey. She said, they're saying Johnny did that. I said, saying Johnny did what? That Johnny did that to that nun. And I said, oh my God. And then it all went crazy. I don't remember much else about that conversation with my sister. I said, I got to go. I remember telling her, I got to go. I got to get down there. I got to get down there. I got to go where my baby is. I got to get down there. So I loaded up my other 3 children, and we got in the car, and we went down to the police station. And of course, when we got there, there were all kinds of lights and cameras and stuff of that nature going on.
I knew him for too many years, and he was a sweet, kind, loving child. He never did anything to hurt anybody. He was always nice and polite. He played with my children. He grew up with my children. And there is no way that Johnny could have done that. No way. And I will never believe it. I believe that Johnny was framed. No elderly person in the neighborhood feared Johnny Frank Garrett. No one. And even after he was accused of this, no one feared him because they all believed that he did not do it. But he was just a slow learner about different things. You know, he's kind of like my son was. And that's why they got along so good together, because they could understand each other a lot better. And you have to have a lot of understanding for somebody that's kind of slow like that.
Apparently there were several stepfathers in this, at least 2 that I know about. These stepfathers had burned him with lighted cigarettes all over his body. He often slept under the football stands at Pascal Stadium, which was the football field adjacent to the high school, because he was afraid to go home, because he didn't want to be further abused. It's hard for me to believe that he would have done anything violent, especially killing and raping one of the elderly nuns.
He never told me whether or not he had abusive parents or not. A lot of times he'd come in and cry, and he'd say, "Can I stay all night?" And I'd say, "Sure." You know, "Does your mom know where you're at?" "Yes."
If he went through a normal bookend, they brought him down, they filled out the P3, which was the arrest form. Then they probably secured a set of fingerprints and palm prints. Then they may have taken him with a male identification tech or a male jailer and collected the personal items, the clippings, the pubic hair combings, the head hair combings, arm hair combings, and things of that nature. Once that had been done, I would believe it then would be the point that they would begin the interrogation. Definitely had his Miranda rights read, signed, videotaped, audio tape, whatever it was. I was in the next room. I just stepped out. I did not get to hear the exact confession.
Well, hell, there's a reason in Texas law we don't admit unsigned confessions, or we shouldn't. It's because you don't know if they ever did it or not. Now, if you've got somebody's signature, that's kind of a different story, or they're tape recorded. That's a little bit different. Garrett said he never saw that, never signed it, never believed it, never agreed to it, any of that. That was all made up by Danny Hill and his happy crew of district attorney investigators and cops down there, which I'd say the historical record suggests were not even remotely trustworthy, any of them. I would be more inclined to disbelieve what anybody on that side of this case said than not.
Within an hour or so, probably less, I was at the police station, and the chief, after I told him I want to speak with him and I wanted to talk to him now, he said, okay, and we went back there, and he said, I told him, no, Johnny didn't do that. He said, yes, he did, because he's already confessed. And I said, no, he did not. He did not confess. That's someone else's confession you have. That's not Johnny's. And he said, no, it's Johnny's. And he said, yes, he did do it. And I said, there's something going on here, and I don't know what it is, but you shouldn't be able to get away with this. I just couldn't believe it. I knew it was happening. And I prayed, and I prayed, and I prayed. It was horrible, a horrible, horrible thing for someone to have to go through that But all through that, I was thinking, what about Johnny? How is he holding up? How's my baby holding up? No, Johnny told me, he said, Mom, I didn't do that. I said, I know you didn't. I know you didn't, baby. You'll be okay.
Police officers, when they're so intent on arresting somebody that they will fabricate evidence or they'll fabricate their testimony to try to show the court that they had probable cause. You know, I think it shows you the mindset of prosecutors and police officers in those days, and even nowadays. Some of them would want to do almost anything to secure a conviction as opposed to investigating a crime.
First time I met with Mr. Coleus, I could tell by the way he acted and the way he talked that it was a lost cause. It was said and done. There wasn't any sense in trying him. They just give up and call it over with. He was gone. He's just gone. And I just as well get used to something like that because he's not going to be back anymore. And that's the opinion that Mr. Coleus left me with that day. And I said, oh my God, this can't be so. Can't be so. And everybody said, he's already confessed, he's already confessed, he's already confessed. And I kept telling them, no, he hasn't confessed. That's somebody else's confession. That's not his. It's someone else. Somebody wrote that. And I thought, well, why are we here then if there's nothing you can do? If there's nothing you can do, we need another attorney, or we need to just go ahead and just call it done and get it over with. Because they're going to railroad him anyway. They're going to do what they want to do, and there's nothing I can do about it because I don't have any money to do anything with.
Most of the evidence was sent either to a State Department of Public Safety lab, or in some of the bigger cases, it would be sent to the FBI laboratory for examination. We didn't have anybody locally at that time who did those type of analysis. Ralph Erdman wouldn't have had the expertise to do the type of examinations that would be required, I don't believe. Thought he was doing a good job at times. I didn't know the difference until I'd see maybe some little things that would take place. Maybe blood in the cavity was always the same amount of blood. Organ sizes, maybe he would put a weight down that I never saw him weigh, and things of that nature. So I think he maybe started to cut corners a little bit, and as an end result, trying to cover up a corner you've already cut just cuts a larger chunk out of the corner, and it makes it harder to cover up.
We get questions about medical examiners. Are they just paid prosecution whores? Some of them are. There were allegations. When it was found that Dr. Erdman had thrown away the vaginal samples, had failed to retain them, there were allegations that Danny Hill had instructed him to throw that stuff away. I did not believe, after having worked with the man for a while, my personal opinion was that Mr. Erdman was intellectually and factually dishonest. And I felt that he would tilt the playing field in favor of the prosecution. He had a Quincy complex. You remember the TV show Quincy? You know, Jack Klugman solves all these cases and he becomes one of the cops, basically. Ralph Erdman thought he was one of the cops. He wanted to be Quincy. And you have to also remember, he's goofy as a peach orchard boar.
And when I would visit with Johnny at the jail, and he was very happy to see us, and he would, at times he would tell us that he hadn't spoken with his attorneys in some time. And I thought, well, that's not right. I would think that they would speak with him often. And he would complain a little bit, and he'd say, but I'm sure, I guess they're doing what they are supposed to do, Mom. I don't know how to do these things, and I don't know. I said, well, I don't know either, Johnny, but I'll see what I can get, you know, information from them or something. And so I'd call him, and I would call him when I got home and leave messages, and I wouldn't get any callbacks. It's like we were just forgotten. He was just forgotten.
Was that an important part of the defense strategy to somehow explain how this fingerprint got there?
Well, bringing out those facts, yeah, absolutely.
Did you guys have an investigator in this case?
No.
Had there been evidence that legitimately placed him in the convent, especially in the nuns' rooms, would have that been an important fact to bring out at trial?
Yeah, I think that would be very important to bring out at trial.
Shortly before Sister Today at Ben's murder, Johnny Frank Garrett had in fact been helping the nuns unload furniture and load furniture into a truck and had been in every nun's room. Were you aware of that fact?
No.
If that's something that you were made aware of, would have you played that card at trial?
Absolutely.
Would have been important?
To me it would, yes.
Do you recall any of the nuns relaying this information to you prior to trial?
No.
Had Mr. Garrett told you about this incident, you certainly would have used that evidence at trial.
Yeah, you would think.
The defense attorneys should have called me. After all, I was very closely involved in all of this. I was the bishop. I'd been a chaplain several times for the sisters. I knew them well. And I knew Johnny Frank Garrett, but it didn't happen. And as far as I know, none of the sisters was asked to testify.
Venue, and actually more to the point, refusing to change venue is one of the classic ways a Texas judge can screw somebody that's on trial, especially for capital murder. And also, nicely ensure for himself plenty of hometown publicity that'll help in a re-election campaign. Johnny Frank Garrett's case was a poster child for change of venue, if ever there was one. The media was all over this case from day one. The crime was outrageous and notorious. That's the kind of case that ought to have venue transferred. Didn't get transferred. Why? Because under the law, we have an asinine, backward standard that ultimately just comes down to whatever the judge wants to do. You can't really reverse those decisions later. Again, no oversight. Whatever they want to do goes.
At a change of venue hearing, you get media people in to testify, you get members of the community in to testify, and the question is, has the reading, listening, and viewing public become so saturated with the facts of the case that we will be unable to get an impartial 12-person jury? Well, the media doesn't want that case to go out of town. It's going to cost them a hell of a lot of money to send a camera crew downtown, out of town, to downstate somewhere, or they've got to pay to get a feed. And having been in the office at that time, Danny Hill took the popular position. He wanted that trial here, in front of his people, in front of his jury.
In those days, we only had the 10 o'clock, 6 o'clock news. Everybody was glued to the news. When you got through with the work, you went home and listened to the news. Any murder case became a cause celebre. I mean, it was on the TV, all 3 channels, everybody was getting a dose of it. It was the most effective political thing that they could have. When Tadea Benz was murdered, everybody, the entire town was riveted by the thought that this saintly nun was killed in her convent by a rapist. And then when they showed up some days later with Johnny Frank Garrett, and we heard the testimony of the police on the TV about he was psychologically damaged, he'd been in trouble. It was the biggest commercial event in television history in Amarillo. Judge Dowling wanted to keep it in Amarillo so he'd get the publicity. And quite frankly, he probably felt some pressure from Danny Hill, political pressure, to keep it in Amarillo. And I don't want to characterize it as fair or unfair. I just think that the prevailing view in the legal community in Amarillo was at that time that, my God, if there was ever a case that you needed to transfer out of Amarillo, it was the Johnny Frank Garrett case. Because his persona in the press was, he was the village idiot. He was the crazy kid from North Amarillo that everybody knew, and he couldn't possibly, and he killed a nun. He couldn't possibly get a fair trial in Amarillo.
A judge that wants to prosecute you instead of judge you can do it in 100 different ways at least. And it starts with the day that the first guy that might be on the jury shows up with the instructions that the judge gives on what we call voir dire and jury selection. The judge can start weighting that whole process and loading it up to begin with. A judge, for example, when you make a challenge to get somebody off that clearly isn't going to uphold the evidence, the judge has the discretion now to decide whether they're really going to be a fair juror. Here's my favorite gimmick in that regard. So, are you saying that you would disobey my orders and not fairly follow the law in this case? Yes or no? Average juror, prospective juror, no, I'll follow the law just like I thought. Then you're on. Rehabilitated. So the judge games it by putting crummy jurors who aren't qualified to be on these cases because they've got right-wing nonsense floating around in their head. That's one way.
I remember that during the voir dire of the jury panel, it lasted 31 days. I do remember that. And I remember sitting with Johnny Frank Garrett for each and every one of those 31 days, every day, all day. And I remember the questioning, even though I wasn't doing the questioning. I do remember the questions that were asked and the fact that they did all have knowledge of the case. I don't know of anyone who, you'd have to be pretty secluded at that time if you didn't know about the Johnny Frank Garrett case in Amarillo. His appearance was one of a young man who was angry and according to some jurors, kind of scary.
When I went to law school, I got taught that the primary value of our whole criminal justice system was in the protection of the innocent. And I also got taught that old maxim that it's better to let 100 guilty people go free than convict or execute one innocent person. That's all been turned on its head now. Things are real different. People are scared. They're motivated by threats seen and unseen from across the water. The government has manipulated the fear that people have for their families, for their children, due to terrorist attacks, whatever. Or maybe just a fear that's engendered by having too many damn people around and not enough resources to go around anymore. All of that has translated itself in a really evil, populist kind of way into the way that the system works. I know now that when I talk to potential jurors on cases, people don't believe in that because you can put it to them square, and I often do. Do y'all believe in the idea that it's better to let 100 guilty people go free than execute an innocent person? And most of them will tell you, no, I don't believe that. Most people now believe if you're going to make an omelet, you got to break some eggs. It's okay as long as they're not one of the eggs that gets broken. Here's what I have heard when I ask the question of jurors, okay, so how many then? If it's okay to do it with one person, if it's all right to kill one innocent person in order to punish 100 guilty people, then how many more innocent guys is it okay to do? And I've heard, well, I think just even. I mean, if you've got to get 20 guilty people, I guess we've just got to get 20 innocent ones. That's an interesting one to start working with them on.
Do you recall any of the experts that you guys called?
I do not.
Who they were? Or did you guys have any experts?
I don't recall any.
For instance, there were no experts for hair analysis?
No.
Or fingerprints?
Mm-mm.
At the time of trial, had there been any testing on these alleged vaginal samples or fluids that were taken from the nun that supposedly proved rape? Had anyone been hired to?
I don't recall if there was any testing on the vaginal samples that they had, or even if they had any vaginal samples to test.
Do you believe that had you asked for money for an expert witness to use or utilize in Johnny Frank Garrett's case, that you would have been provided with those funds to do so by Judge Dowling?
Yes, I do.
Do you recall whether you guys asked for any money?
I do recall that we did not ask for any money.
Was it a valuable fact for you guys to share with the jury during the defense that there had been other suspects in this case before Garrett?
I don't recall that. I don't remember if...
Were there other fingerprints found in the nun's room that weren't matched to Garrett or the nun or anyone else in the convent?
I'm sure there were. There should have been.
Was that an issue at trial? Was that brought up?
I don't recall if that was or not.
That it looked like to me that the match had gotten thrown early on. That the defense lawyers in that case didn't do anything for him, certainly not at the guilt-innocence phase of that trial. And that's what it was all about, because Johnny Frank Garrett denied committing the crime. The stuff about where the sample should have been asked then, this never came up. They never tried to objectively test any of that stuff. It struck me as really bizarre. At the time, it's like, okay, there's a semen fluid sample that supposedly convicts the kid, that Erdman bases his opinion on, saying that there was a rape that was done and that Johnny Frank Garrett was the rapist. Why didn't you guys test that? For that matter, why didn't you even ask to look at the damn thing, to find it, to figure any of that evidence out? Not a question one was ever asked at the original trial, as I recall, about any of that. I never got that. I never ever got that. And no effort was made before trial either to run down any of that evidence. I certainly never got that. The worst I can say is that something else was going on, some kind of a deal got made, they threw the case.
Well, when we went into deliberation, the first thing we did is we prayed. After we said that prayer, it seemed like minutes of silence. Once the silence was broken, everybody said, well, let's have a vote. And at that particular time, it wasn't unanimous. My first vote was not guilty. If, God forbid, I was ever on the wrong side of the courtroom, if I had to be in front of 12 angry men, I would pray to God that they would be 12 religious people. How could a man sit and judge another man when they don't know God?
Disgusting display of how far Danny Hill had sunk that I'd ever seen. Because what I saw on that day in the hearing was him and a little gaggle of his friends from the district attorney's office and these cronies and sycophants that worked for him, playing with plastic syringes that they'd brought along for the purpose. They were giggling and squeezing them like that because they were having such a good time. I wasn't the only one that was aghast at this gruesome display. I was partially aghast at this whole thing with the syringes, not just because it was gross and disgusting in and of itself, but also because it was even more gross and disgusting to do that with his family members. They didn't do anything. They were there because they loved the kid.
There was a photographer from a local TV station that followed the mother of the accused into the bathroom, and all during the time of she was out in the hallway, was taking her picture, and to get away from the press, she went in the women's bathroom at the courthouse. And this photographer was a female photographer. She went into the bathroom, stuck the camera up over the stall to get a photograph of the mother of the accused in the bathroom. That had to be the worst thing, worst misconduct on the part of the press I've ever heard of.
There's things that we should have been told, which we were not. There was things that was lost or dropped or covered up. I don't know what you want to call it. We should have known those things. If I'd heard or was told or presented that another person had been indicted or arrested, yes, it would have made an impact on me as far as, well, now, wait a minute, we're not hearing the whole story. These facts about another person being molested, raped, elderly women, that wasn't told to us. another person being killed, that wasn't told us. If I'd have known back then he had been in that room delivering furniture, that would have made a big impact on all of the jurors. The sperm or the evidence of that sperm was not there. Because we asked, the jurors asked, well, why was there not sperm collected from the nun? If we would have known at that time that it had been misplaced, mishandled, anything like that, yeah, it would have made a big difference. If we were presented evidence about different hair sample being on the nun's body, right there, questionable doubt. They'd have to prove where that came from. About the security guard with chasing a black person that was actually bit by a dog, it could have changed everything. If they'd have just said, okay, there's other fingerprints, there's other hair, that's a reasonable doubt. That's a question. Okay, we need to find this out. Well, if they can't tell us that, it would have made a difference in the outcome. Yes, sir. We weren't told all the facts. We were told the highlights. For some reason, we were not told all the evidence. You rely on your doctors, your attorneys, the court system. Sometimes you rely on them too much.
And then we got ready and we went to the prison, and we went in and they situated us there at the place where they visit. I'd never seen Johnny Frank so pale. He was just so pale. He looked bad. He looked sick. He looked tired. That's what it was. He looked so tired. And I know he wanted to get it over with. I know he did. He wanted either out of there or just let's get it over with. He was tired. He just wanted us to know that he loved us. And he was very proud of us. And he was glad to have been my son. And I told him, oh my God, I wouldn't have traded him for all the world. Well, I was proud of him being my son as well. And he said, Mom, I didn't do that. And I know, baby, I know. He kept telling me. Of course, we were in the front row, and everybody was standing behind us. I don't know who everybody, the reporters, and I don't know who all was there. And they were all pretty quiet, and then they opened up this curtain. I believe there was a curtain there. And Johnny was laying there, stretched out. His arm was stretched out.
Yeah, Warden. As a matter of fact, there are some things I want to say. I'd like to thank my friends and my family. And I'd like to thank my guru and everybody else that's helped me get through all this. And for the rest of this world, well, you can kiss my ever-loving ass because I'm innocent. And for those people responsible for my murder tonight, you know who you are. Well, I got some words for you too, but I put those in a letter. Something for you to look forward to tomorrow.
Kept saying how much he loved us, and then then we sort of, he told the rest of the world they could kiss his ass. It was a very traumatic experience for us, and I know it was even worse for Johnny.
was an even worse experience for that little boy, for my child, for my son. It was horrible for him. It was hard for me, but it was so much harder for him. And when we walked out, they were chanting, "Kill the freak, remember the nun. Kill the freak, remember the nun," and cheering because Johnny was dead then. They were cheering that he was dead. And of course my daughters, they started to scream back at him. And I said, "Oh, no, 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 don't do that here. Don't do that here. We'll do it later. Don't cry. Don't give them any expressions whatsoever. Just go to the car and don't let them don't let them have that glory."
I have been charged, convicted, sentenced, and punished for rape and murder. If given the chance, I could have proven not only beyond a reasonable doubt, but beyond any doubt, my innocence. You, society, did not give me a chance to do so. I'm resigned to death. All people die. I'm going to die with a clear conscience, a whole spirit, and a man. An honorable warrior's death. But you, society, will live in shame. In your nightmares I will live. Every death of your families will be me. I will be the one who meets your family's souls, and they will pay for what you, society, have done to my family. I will be the fear you will experience upon your last breath. I curse your souls to the deepest depths of your own hell. I curse your parents' souls to the same hell, and your grandparents' souls, and your ancestors clean back to the damnable dog that began your line. I curse every person remotely related to your infected blood. And because I know that the curses will be fulfilled, I meet death in a better spirit and stronger soul. Within months of Johnny Frank Garrett's execution, the parade of victims began. Dr. Ralph Erdman was indicted for falsifying autopsy reports and committing perjury in dozens of civil and criminal cases. He was convicted and sentenced to prison. His wife died from pancreatic cancer. That same year, attorney Bill Coleus also died of pancreatic cancer. Kathy Jones, the NBC News reporter who chased Garrett's mother into the courthouse bathroom, died instantly in a plane crash while covering a story in Oklahoma. Judge Sam Kaiser and attorney Bruce Sadler were both diagnosed with the same rare form of leukemia. Sadler struggles with the disease to this day. Judge Kaiser wasn't so lucky. Initially cured, Kaiser's doctors extracted his healthy bone marrow in case of recurrence. The leukemia came back, but his healthy bone marrow inexplicably disappeared from the hospital lab where it was extracted. He died within months. Task Force members Walt Yerger and Jimmy Don Boydston also contracted leukemia and died. Juror Novella Sumner fell down a flight of stairs at her home and died a week later of complications from her injuries. Juror Nathan Shackelford's daughter died from an accidental gunshot wound to the head. His sister was run over and killed by a drunk driver. Michael Heavy Duty Patterson, Bubble's husband, was found dead, slumped over the steering wheel of his truck in his driveway. A cause of death was never determined. Lonnie Watley, a jailhouse snitch who, for a reduced sentence, testified at trial that Johnny Frank Garrett admitted killing Sister Benz, committed suicide. Carol Moore, Johnny Frank Garrett's school teacher, also committed suicide. District Attorney Danny Hill became addicted to alcohol and prescription drugs. After 2 DWIs, fellow prosecutors testified against him in an effort to remove him from office. On April 9, 1995, Hill ended his life with a single gunshot to the heart. His youngest daughter followed his lead and hung herself a few years later. On Halloween night, 1981, in the city of Amarillo, Texas, the line between good and evil became blurred in a haze of fear. Is it possible that Johnny Frank Garrett, lost, confused, and forgotten, somehow tapped into the powers of a dark force? A dark force which gave him a voice from the grave. A voice which allowed him to have the last word.
His fingerprints were found right next to her stabbed and violated body. You convict that devil, I swear to God, he will kill again.
Find the defendant guilty of rape and murder. I'm innocent! I didn't kill him!
We're assembled here today to witness the execution of Johnny Frank Garrett. Anything you want to say to us right now, son?
I would like to tell you for a final time that I am innocent.
They killed Johnny Frank Garrett. It took 10 years, but they finally did it.
There's been a lot of strange things happening. People connected to the trial. Accidents, illnesses.
She's been having dreams about Johnny Frank Garrett.
You know what kind of curse holds the most power? Curse of the innocent. Lazy defense lawyers, corrupt medical examiners. They don't want us to know.
You're saying he might have been innocent. I convicted him.
It's done. Bastard's dead.
Johnny's soul wants justice.
You people, I despise every one of you, and I curse your souls to the deepest depths in hell. Every death of your families will be me. I have your fear. You can't kill me. I will live in your nightmares. This ends tonight.
I got a surprise coming for you.